Chapter 23, 1998. After the longest 3 months of his life, Steve had finally made it back from the US, just in time for the last of the pre-Christmas parties. The festive season came and went, but before the lights came down, Steve was off on another 6-week trip around Europe, the band doing guest spots and all the promotional nonsense that they were expected to do. This was supposed to be the quiet time of year when bands didn't do much live, normally the point where all the industry would take a breath and recharge. By the time he got back, it was March, and the wheels were already in motion for the festival season that always kicked off in June. If Steve didn't take a break in the next few weeks, it would be the end of the year before he could find time for a rest. Tina was concerned that he was at risk of burning out and called him into her office on one of Steve's occasional visits to London. She had barely seen him since he'd headed off to New York the previous September, and his trip back at Christmas was when the office was closed, as London shut for business and the workers temporarily, and often reluctantly relocated back to their friends and family around the country. In Tina's case, it was to her mother in Wiltshire. For Steve, it was the trip down the A3 to his parents. But even there, he had worked non-stop when he wasn't sleeping off the result of 3 months living and travelling across North America. He had signed up for a career in this industry, and the one thing worse than doing all the hard work was not having that work to do as nobody cared about your bands, or you. The sudden success across America was unexpected and significant. Off the back of that trip, there was a headline tour booked, and the high-pressure follow-up album was slated to be recorded from late March. That would take them all up to Easter weekend. The release would coincide with the summer festivals, which would kickstart a headline tour across Europe. Tina had seen this kind of burnout before, and she knew the cost to Steve would be career terminal if it wasn't addressed. All the victims she'd encountered, and she knew that she'd been directly responsible for many of them, had broken at a critical time in their short but promising careers. Recovery was rare. The old maxim about standing the heat or leaving the kitchen was written into the industry HR handbook, if such a thing existed. Tina was a good boss and would do anything for those who were going to reward her, and she knew that if Steve could hold it together now, he would be bringing the label rewards for years to come. Recognition with the Cormacs would get the label the next band, the financial rewards of which brought them all a step closer to the swimming pool in the grounds of a Santorini villa, and just maybe that half share of the local vineyard with views of the sunset which she continued to dream about. Tina had started to fantasize over that sort of indulgent retirement, and that villa would be a long overdue fuck you to everybody who had pissed her off. It would also be an extra special fuck you to the long, shitty meetings full of patronising misogynists who doubted her place in the industry. She had a business to run and needed to protect her assets. Steve, you've done well, but you need to chill out for a couple of weeks. Recharge. Smell the roses. You know what I'm saying? Have you got someone to go on holiday with? I'll pay. Steve didn't register the offer. Anything that deviated from his diarised schedule and little pieces of paper full of the notes that held his life together was not something that he had time for. He replied instinctively, failing to acknowledge the tone of authority Tina had used. I'm too busy, Tina. We have so much to do in advance of the album. Steve, I'm not asking you to take a holiday. I'm telling you. I don't think you heard me. I'm the boss and you've not stopped. You're going on leave for 2 weeks. I'm sending you to Barbados, and the only question I have for you is whether I'm buying 1 ticket or 2. This was not a conversation. It was distinctly an order coming from one direction only, with no wriggle room for comeback. It was another instruction in a long line of instructions from Tina that he had come to respect. He carefully put down his laptop, closing the lid with what seemed like carefully choreographed symbolism. He knew he was breaking. Tina had already seen the signs in him, and she had once again called it right. Barbados in March, though. Get in. The flicker of a smile registered as he played back the conversation. There were worse ways to spend time. Should he invite Greta? Against his judgment, he had drifted back into the easy option. He had been seeing Greta since their collective loneliness collided in a jet-lagged pre-Christmas trip on his return from the US. Theirs remained an arrangement of convenience which still never got anywhere near setting his world alight. In fact, the best way to describe his thing with Greta was boring. There was just no spark. The compromise for them both accepting their comfortable coexistence when their schedules occasionally collided. The relationship was limited to drinks on Upper Street, and sometimes dinner. If the drinks went well, they'd end up at one of their flats. But conversation remained minimal, shared interest was zero, and they never stayed over with each other after they'd hooked up. He remembered that he had definitely slept with her a couple of times over the last few months, but could not actually remember the various periods of preamble or any of the actual deeds. It had to end, really end this time. No going back. He was done. The long flight to fresh coconuts and local rum was one he'd be taking alone. 1 ticket will be fine, and thanks, Tina. Steve breathed a sigh of relief. He hadn't realised until that moment just how tired he was. Great. You leave in 2 days. I'll get you booked into the hotel we use in Bridgetown, and the rest is up to you. Get yourself some clothes and a new pair of budgie smugglers, and leave your bloody phone here. That's an order. I don't want you being disturbed.